What is your definition of television?
Um, Television is video, and I'm sure plenty of other people have said exactly the same thing, and the device is irrelevant from a consumer point of view, which is really the only perspective I really care about. Obviously, I care about what it means for businesses, but unless I fully understand and can convey an understanding of how consumers engage with video content, I'm not much use to my clients. So really it is about video via any platform I as a consumer choose to access it whenever I want to. And from a business perspective, it's a means by which I can reach people with full sight, sound and motion, and it's a means that I can sustainably monetize to a sufficiently high degree. And that, of course, is the big question of people today, because we don't have the answer to that for a lot of the platforms we're currently using.
Do you think we'll get to a point soon that we'll have true cross-platform measurement that will become a standard currency?
I think if we define true cross-platform measurement in a fairly narrow, simplistic and static way, we might get there in 3, 4, 5 years. But media are fluid, consumers are fluid, and no business has exactly the same agenda as any other business. And the more variables you put into the mix, it means the more media and the more different uses of those individual media, the less likely you are to find the concept of a standard actually being even remotely relevant, let alone applicable. So the short answer, which that wasn't, is never. We'll never actually arrive at a true, sustainable, fixed standard for cross-platform measurement. We'll get somewhere close and we'll get somewhere helpful, but let's not try and arrive at the end point.
What do you think the impact of connected TVs will be on measurements, since it will all be digitized?
Well, the real impact is about the back channel. We have TVs which, with the consent of the owners, the consent of the households, can provide data on what is on those screens second by second, 24/7, 365 days a year. And when devices are synced to those TVs, it can also talk about the presence and use of those other devices like tablets and phones in the household, which is huge, obviously, and which opens out potential not just for more measurement companies, it opens out the potential for others who aren't currently on the landscape to play in that role, whether those are consumer electronics manufacturers or companies we don't even know about right now. And I think one other thing which really excites me about connected TVs is the opportunity to shorten the distance between a TV ad as broadcast and the transaction via a second screen device. Because with ACR technology and fingerprinting one sort or another, it's increasingly possible, and there are plenty of applications now in development, in trial, some even being deployed, where coupons of one sort or another, promotional offers, can be served to the second screen device. They may have a 24-hour life before they disappear in certain circumstances, but they go to the phone and then they can be redeemed at point of sale. That brings a level of accountability to the conventional advertising process that thus far has been completely absent. And I think it will add enormous value to TV advertising. It won't make everything transactional, because that's not the only reason even a transactionally led campaign might be driven. You've still got to carry those branding messages. But it also adds value to the mobile proposition. It actually gets away from this rather tedious us versus them platform argument which we've heard for years, and it talks about how the two can act together to add value to each other and to the advertiser and to the content provider and the broadcaster and so on. That, I think, is really interesting, and it adds another layer to measurement.
Mobile is a very individual device. How do you think privacy will play into all of this?
That's a really interesting thing. Coming from Europe, I have a perspective on privacy, as I would call it, which was shaped by the fact we have regulations around this kind of thing which are much tighter, and interestingly, where American companies who bemoan any kind of regulation in this country work very well within European regimes, and they're jolly profitable and all the rest of it. I think rightly there are going to be some concerns as people get familiar with, become more aware of what data is captured via televisions as well as other other platforms like mobile. I remember doing some work just before I left Ball State. It was the last piece we worked on with the so-called digital natives who could talk till the cows came home about the semantic web, but really had very little idea about what was actually being captured and why it was being captured, how it was being used, who it was being used, and they really didn't like what they did know. As they found out more, they were very much against it, but they realised it was part and parcel of being in the 21st century and they were powerless to do anything about it. Personally, I think the key to addressing this and the concerns that will come with it isn't simply to say, well, then get off the internet or get off your mobile phone or people don't care about it. Neither of those two positions are helpful. The key is about being transparent. You know, I've written in the past and presented in the past on this, and I basically said transparency is the new green. I think brands stand to gain a great deal, whether those are media brands or others, by being very clear about what data is being captured, why it's being captured, what it's going to be used for, what it's not going to be used for, and making the language that we all see in those things that we have to click and agree to in order to use something. Sure, it's got to be the legalese, but what about an interpretation over here for somebody who actually wants to understand it and is going to give the time? Or what about a video? Or what about an infographic? All these things that millennials get and understand. And I think just being seen to make the effort to meet the consumer part way and to help them understand what's going on and to take away the veil of Big Brother makes you accessible. And the other point I would make is, although we get nervous about these things and although some of us complain about these things, one of the things which enables a brand to get around those concerns is just really, really good service. And the example I always give is Amazon. You will hear in focus groups or one-on-one interviews or whatever it may be, hear people talking about how they hate the way they capture your data, they being any brand, and what they do with it and so on. The next minute they're talking about how great Amazon is. And they're talking about how it's brilliant, how I can buy stuff, and they send me these great recommendations and I always want this stuff, as if they haven't really thought through how it works. So very good service from a trusted source makes the difference. It's when you mess up that it really comes and bites you. So I think it's understanding where the tolerances are, not being wholly driven by them, but being sympathetic to them and being seen to be empathetic, I think is the key.